Of course, I've got a love of food and a love of creativity, but I also have a love of being able to engage my teams and give them the opportunity to be involved with that process. So the longer I've been in, this job, the less I've actually had to create dishes, which is, I suppose, where I've wanted the direction of my career to be.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. The path to success is different for most of us, but one of the guides that help one's journey lies in working under the right people. More than most industries, mentors have become key to the development of young chefs and waitstaff who are eager for a career in the most vibrant industry of all, hospitality. But what makes a great mentor, and what impact does a great mentor have on young people finding their feet? Oliver Gould is the executive chef of Asado and Palermo's in Melbourne. Oliver, how are you going?
Good, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
What's things like at the moment? You're in lockdown number 6 in Melbourne. What sort of impact has it had on you?
I think this one being so close to lockdown 5, it's been a really big kick in the guts. Obviously, again, it takes probably a good 2 weeks to recover from each lockdown to get, I suppose, let's say 70% back to where we should be. And then the next 2 weeks, there's a bit more confidence around Melbourne where we can get back to close to 100. It's 3 steps back, 1 step forward at the moment. So it's rather deflating, but we're doing what we can to, keep the team engaged and, try and move forward with whatever initiatives we can to keep the restaurants going and visible and promoting them in the way that we need to.
You're the executive chef over 2 restaurants with the big kitchen brigade. What's it like making sure the mental health of the younger chefs is okay during this time and getting the best out of them?
I suppose that's the challenge of any manager or business owner with any team, but particularly in hospitality, knowing from years of it in the industry that mental health is something that does impact a lot of people. Fortunately, we're in an age now where a lot of people are certainly open to talking about it and certainly want to bring up any issues or concerns they have. As well, my job is to understand whether others below me have something that they need help with. So, we certainly each lockdown reassure staff that obviously there's the support for them, whether it's financial support, particularly with casuals. We do make sure that, they get some hours to be able to pay rent. And through the week, it's certainly our obligation to make sure that they're, engaged in something. We try and keep them occupied with, certain tasks or activities that they can help with at home so that they feel like they're still part of the business. So, it's significant right across Australia, mental health at the moment. And, we all know the stats of, the youth suicide and whatnot. So we certainly do our best to engage with our staff to keep them on a positive path.
You've had an incredible career and won many accolades that we can get to at some stage, but where did it all start for you? When did the interest in food begin?
Initially, I suppose in my early days, I was active in cooking at home, and home food was fairly basic but tasty. But I as a young kid, always enjoyed making cakes and slices and pastas and things with mum and licking the spoons and feeling like I was learning along the way. And it got to the point of mid-high school where we needed to choose a work placement path. So I chose hospitality and ended up working at a restaurant called The Keg, which back in the day was a bit of a chain around Australia. And I sort of got the bug there, albeit not for the right things in the beginning. It wasn't necessarily regarding food, but I loved being, involved in a team environment. I loved, I suppose, being given an opportunity to, speak my mind and, talk to older people, above me. I started as a 15-year-old and worked at the keg for a couple of years, and most people there were all sort of late high school or uni students. So it sort of, it engaged me with, I suppose, learning how to talk with adults. It taught me some other things as well. It taught me how to drink and be silly and stupid at the same time. But at least it got me, I suppose, addicted to the beginnings of hospitality. And I knew that was the career that I would seek following that.
You ended up taking an apprenticeship at the iconic Stokehouse many moons ago. What was it like stepping into that kitchen? And do you have any stories from that time?
Stokehouse was a special place and certainly was well before I got there and continued to be when I left. It was a place that, no matter what part you had to play there, you felt like you were something important and part of something really significant. And obviously Stokehouse had a reputation for many years as the place to be for all the celebs coming to town before the casino opened. And there was always lots of energetic young Brighton kids to work with that always lifted you up and drove you forward. Particularly in the kitchen. When I started as an 18-year-old, I probably didn't fit in initially. I suppose based on where I'd come from, I didn't have the skill set that a lot of those guys had that had been, cooking high volume food for a number of years, and a lot of people that were probably not burnt out, but the end of their career as well, that had significant tempers and could have a tantrum on any given day. But at the end of the day, it was always something that we all enjoyed being a part of it. So I think on my first day, I was downstairs, and middle of summer back then, there was probably eight chefs and a couple of kitchen hands working, and it got to 11:30 before service, and I was like gearing up to get into it. I was probably getting ready to cook on the fryer at that point, and all of a sudden everyone disappeared from the kitchen, and I was like, oh, what's happening here? Is there some sort of prank that's about to be thrown on me? And I walked around and couldn't find anyone, so I went out the back into the bin area, and there was 10 people having a cigarette together. So, that sort of taught me, quickly, I suppose, the not the type of people working with you, but the habits that I suppose hospitality people had in that time. So if you needed a break, it was to have a cigarette, which I didn't pick up straight away, but it certainly was something that was recognised further down the career, that if you wanted to sit down, you probably needed to have a smoke with you. But Stokehouse certainly had a lot of wonderful interesting personalities and people that I looked up to as a young chef, and certainly people that I was able to lean upon. One of my good friends these days, he was a junior sous downstairs, and I was sick of cooking fish and chips and bowls of chips for the first 6 months, and fortunately I started driving him home because he'd lost his license, and I sort of told him, I can cook steaks. I've been cooking for 3 years before this. And he's like, oh, can you? So I think it took a week or two, and he popped me on the grill for a couple of shifts, and everyone soon realised that I could actually do the job and do it fairly well in a kitchen where there was probably 5 or 6 apprentices at the time, and it was something you'd fight for to be seen and get onto the next section to continue learning. And I sort of jumped the herd and was able to show my skills and fortunately move up and continue to learn.
Mentors have played a real key feature in the building of your career, who's been real influences on you, and what sort of impact have they had?
Well, I'd say, although I worked with Morris Esposito for a short period of time, but he certainly engaged me in the care and precision needed to cook and execute beautiful food. So I respect Morris for what he's done over the years. He's always been a stalwart in Italian cooking in Melbourne. And following him leaving upstairs, Anthony Massara joined us from Radii, and I suppose he was the first person I realised that he'd obviously knew how to run a kitchen and knew how to assert himself with the right people, and knew how to manage people in the way that they needed to be managed. And fortunately for me, and the guy that I was talking about before gave me a leg up downstairs. He was upstairs at the time, and both of them, I suppose, understood my capabilities and engaged me in what I needed at the time to, I suppose, get myself from, again, being at the bottom of the kitchen to the top, enabling me to prove myself along the way. But I suppose as a mentor, Anthony certainly gave me that opportunity to step into the head chef role after a couple of years with him, and he certainly continued to mentor me, I suppose, from afar as he stepped out of the kitchen. But I suppose it was a level of getting thrown in the deep end as well to run Stokehouse when we reopened after a renovation, to really hope, to really ingrain my creativity on a menu.
Well, tell us about what it was like in your first head chef role. How different is it to just being part of the team, and what sort of footprint did you leave in regards to food?
I suppose let's talk about managing the kitchen. I was unfortunately one of those things where I just thought I had to do everything myself. And I didn't, although I had some great mates working with me, initially I didn't engage them in contributing to the running of the kitchen until I sort of realised that, oh shit, I've lost a few staff here, and if I lose these guys, I'm stuffed. So, from a management's perspective, I really recognised valuing staff that had great potential and had already proven themselves, and so I was able to sort of, offload some responsibility and incorporate my team into what we were building. From a food perspective, I really, although the style of the food at Stokehouse was always fantastic, I sort of wanted to take it to another level, and at the time I thought another level was putting 3 or 4 more elements on a dish and trying to compete with the 3-hat restaurants in Melbourne, which worked for a while, but again, you recognise that, particularly in a busy restaurant like Stokehouse, there's some things are possible and others aren't. So I suppose ultimately I recognised that what I could give to Stokehouse was a balanced menu that focused on produce and flavour, and dishes that had 1 or 2 elements that perhaps hadn't been seen before, but hadn't been thought about going with a particular item. As an example, putting Murray cod with a bacon consomme or something like that. It's probably been done before, but certainly things like that hadn't been put forward at Stokehouse in the past.
This influence that you had resulted in 2 chef's hats, and you also won the 2014 Young Chef of the Year with the Age Good Food Guide. What sort of impact did those accolades have on you?
The 2 hats, I suppose, was certainly recognition for hard work, and not just for myself, but it's a whole business and a group of people that always had strived to offer the best service and food they could. I suppose over the years I've recognised that if you're chasing hats, it actually puts a lot of does put a lot of pressure on you, and when you go from 2 to 1 to 2 to 1 to 1 and whatnot, it can be as a youngster, it was sort of quite it was quite a burden if you felt you hadn't succeeded that year. But I do, hats are important and a great accolade, but I do certainly now appreciate that, if you know you're doing something great for yourself, then that's all you need to do. Regarding the award, again, it's, any award or accolades about, recognising the work that you've put in, and thankfully the Young Chef of the Year award, I suppose, is something that recognises future potential in someone, as well as also what they've already achieved. So, that's something that's certainly held me in good stead. It's nice to put on a bio and have people recognise that you've won something that's in the industry was or is perceived to be quite special. So, and for me to hire and train young staff these days, although they may not understand what the Good Food Guide was back in the day, they see awards and things like that as something exciting, and look at me as someone they'd like to work for.
At the Stokehouse, it's when you started a real focus on quality produce, and you've made many connections with producers across the country. What's some of the real important connections that you've had with producers?
I've recognised there's people that you align yourself that, if you can engage them and build a relationship, those relationships, often benefit both of you, and both, by that meaning, you have access to their best produce, and you have access to, being able to visit their farms and train your staff and get them to understand and appreciate the produce as well. So, one that's probably stands out is O'Connor's beef. We were using, them at Stokehouse back in the day, let's say 10 years ago, and I was fortunate enough to do a video with Tim O'Connor for Savour Australia one year, and I suppose now with the direction I've taken with basically a all meat focused venue, O'Connor's certainly stands out as at the forefront of the basis of our meat offering. A lot of the producers that I've probably had an opportunity to engage with more were when I went over to WA. West Australia's great at heralding their local produce, and they really do strive on making sure that there's a connection between paddock to plate, or sea to plate, as you might say. So that really opened my eyes to understanding the importance of engaging the grower and the producer to benefit both areas.
This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you.
The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking at a slightly firmer texture. So there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
You left the Stokehouse and moved to Perth to take the helm of the kitchen at the Shore House. Tell us about that experience and what it was like compared to being a head chef in Melbourne.
It was a bit of a whirlwind experience. I'd sort of been looking at other options post Stokehouse, and fortunately this option came up, but I was a bit hesitant to ship myself over there with my partner. So by the time I said yes, let's do it, they wanted to open the doors a week later. So because due to obviously having everything ready to go, they just needed a head chef and a kitchen team. So when you've got a week to sort your shit out and hire a group of chefs in a interstate town, that was a daunting experience, and unfortunately, with the job market in Perth, although we talk about the job market in Melbourne being tough a lot of the time, it was extra tough in WA until all the backpackers got there. So if you applied for a job, you got one at Stokehouse initially, and fortunately, I had 4 strong chefs to begin with. So it was basically I'd say we were probably the most expensive team in Australia. I had to hire 4 sous chefs and a junior sous chef just to get bums onto seats so that we could operate a kitchen at full capacity. And Stokehouse, I suppose, in a similar vein and demographic to Stokehouse, was waterside on just north of Cottesloe Beach. A big outdoor deck with 250 seats. We'd be full breakfast, lunch and dinner for 5-6 months of the year. So the initial part was the hard part, and ongoing, with anything in hospitality, if you can, as soon as you start losing staff, you've got to then, it's a cycle of recruitment and, trying to fill holes and, plug holes where you need to. But, once that was all stable, I really enjoyed having a new lease on creativity. We weren't certainly looking at, becoming a hatted restaurant over there. It was sort of a balance between, good quality casual, and again trying to find a new element that diners in Perth perhaps hadn't been exposed to before.
So over in WA, you had a real connection with producers. Was there any produce that really stood out for you over there?
I suppose looking at the produce in WA broadly, a lot of it I'd had access to in Melbourne. But if I look at the produce that I'd loved using in Melbourne, but perhaps was either too expensive or difficult to access, I'd look at things like Shark Bay blue swimmer crabs and Shark Bay prawns. Fremantle octopus was always a winner and highly regarded as one of the best Occy suppliers in the country. But I suppose as I developed my menus there were certainly dishes that stood out as customer favourites or dishes that sold in exponential quantities. So looking at a blue swimmer crab and prawn linguine, which I suppose you put that on any menu in Australia, it'll do well. But if you're sitting on a beach on a hot sunny day, that was certainly the dish of choice. So I'd go up. Fortunately, was able to go up and see Peter Jecks at Abacus Fisheries, and we built a good connection while I was there. And particularly when I'd buy 300 kilo at a time of picked crab meat off him, he certainly recognised that I was someone that was passionate about his product, and we certainly worked well together to get the best out of his products as well as promoting them in Perth. But even if you delve down south to some of the regions down there, looking down. Looking down to Margaret River, there's this beautiful Margaret River Wagyu that was something that was always special. Obviously, the Marans that WA regard as one of their prized possessions. You might put Marin on your menu, and it's really hard to make a buck off Marin and do it well with Perth people, because they've probably been exposed to it for so long. But those ingredients, were certainly things that we could play with and again work on to make a more unique dish that would entice our customers to come back.
These days, you're executive chef of a group that's got a real focus on Argentinian cuisine. What's it been like being at the helm of this and this exploration of such a meat-focused offering?
I've certainly had to spin my way of thinking around, just touching on previous jobs. Lastly, they were both on the beach, so obviously a high-end high focus on seafood. So spinning that over to Palermo and Asado being part of the San Telmo group, my way of thinking certainly changed. Our food offering, certainly designed around a backbone of offering high quality beef and cooked on a Asado parrilla. So looking at really enhancing flavors with wood fire and charcoal cooking. So I suppose from a creative perspective, the meat can speak for itself, but it's all about tying it into the rest of the theme of cuisine. And we've linked Palermo to have a more Italian focus of Argentina, and Asado's taken the line of a Spanish influence. So I suppose my work has sort of been able to define two menus that are similar but still speak for themselves. So Italian influence has certainly directed Palermo towards, having a crudo on and some, focaccia and the occasional pasta, whereas Asado would, we've always got a strong focus on tapas and pinchos and, focus on, seasonal vegetables that would easily grill and take on some of that beautiful smoke from our style of cooking. And in particular, both restaurants have a fire pit. So initially that fire pit concept of cooking whole animals, whether it be pig and a lamb, that took a good deal of time to get right. And a good bit of research, but after 3 years, we've certainly got our menus in the restaurant where we want them to be.
What sort of impact has it had on you as a chef as you've immersed yourself in a different style of cookery and cuisine?
I suppose it's the food we do is a lot simpler than I've always needed to, or felt the need to be involved with. So it initially took some time to dumb my thinking down to actually say, well, if I can make a beautiful salt crode coquette, it doesn't need much else. So in that sense, and particularly in training my head chefs and the chefs down the tree, it's about minimizing things and appreciating that we can do beautiful food with the tools that we have. And, part of the development of the junior staff is giving a lot of them opportunity to put forward dishes. And quite often the feedback will be, do you think it needs this and this? Could it just be, those two elements? So, the way of thinking in terms of how we build a menu and build a dish has certainly changed for me over the years.
What sort of impact has it had on your love of food? Has it changed the way you see the role of a head chef?
The older I get, I suppose, I've got a love of food and a love of creativity, but I also have a love of being able to engage my teams and give them the opportunity to be involved with that process. So the longer I've been in, this job, the less I've actually had to create dishes, which is, I suppose, where I've wanted the direction of my career to be. I recognised early on that I didn't want to be a chef at 60, slogging it over the stove, and there needed to be a way to get out of the kitchen. So, recognising the talent within the team has certainly changed the way that I, think about my role as a executive chef. And, if you can recruit people that already have a passion and will continue to have the passion and creativity and actively engaging their junior staff, that's where my love sits for food right now, is, developing people for the future, I suppose.
What do you love about Argentinian in cuisine?
I think Argentinian cuisine, the love is, is part of the package, or part of the love is the package of the the process of the cook. The process of a cook in Argentina is to, do your preparation in the morning. You put some small bits of, a couple of bits of sausage on the grill at lunchtime, and you throw your big cuts of meat on at the same time, and it's a progression of dining from, let's say 1 o'clock right through to 7 o'clock at night. So I like the concept of how that relates to what I enjoy about entertaining and cooking at home. It's, like we all do, it's great to have mates over and light the barbie and crack some beers and spend a day with people that you may not get to see very often. So in the restaurants, I suppose, particularly our way of dining is about a progression of menus. So starting off with small items, being at empanadas or croquettes, and moving into smaller meats and some lighter entrees, and then hitting the big stuff off the grill. And I think the concept is part of what makes Argentinian food so good.
The last year and a half has had a major impact on so many, but has there been some positives to come out of this adversity for you?
I suppose it's, the positives would analyse human nature and team spirit in the way that we've been able to consider retaining all of our staff through the pandemic. When I say all, people have left, people have gone back overseas and moved on. But particularly during the first lockdown, it was our intentions to retain everyone when we were able to get back up and running. So particularly, long lockdown in the beginning, we had 45, international staff that didn't have access to JobKeeper. So, we ran Asado as a takeaway venue because we've got a little takeaway shop out the back, and any profit that we made or any of the sales that we made went to them so that they could pay their rent and live week to week. Obviously, that's great support, but also we wanted to re-engage them and show them respect when we were able to operate again. So along the way, our staff have recognised that there's care from ownership and senior management, that their needs and desires are at the forefront before anything else. Certainly we want to get up to speed and get our restaurants back up and running. But if we don't have the staff there to run them for us, there's not much left. So, that mentality's filtered through the team, and junior staff, mid-level staff certainly are more engaged with a team environment and a caring environment, and making sure that everyone's well looked after, whether it's at work or during the next lockdown. A commie chef will say, "Oh, is Joe Blow and Maria getting hours next week?" Because that's really important, and we'll sort of put their mind at ease to say, yes, that's certainly something that we want to be doing to make sure that everyone's okay.
What sort of advice would you have for young people looking for clear career paths and to make a real success in the industry?
I think a key part of, once you've chosen to be in hospitality and you commit to, delving into a kitchen, you really need to, once you're there, be fully engaged and be someone that is always seeking training and seeking to learn. I find a lot of kids, will come in and, here's your section, you're on larder, here's your induction, here's the training for larder, and then they go about their business and, do well in that regard. But, the people that always excel are the ones that are trying to learn tasks that aren't specific to what they've already been trained. So I would always hope that, someone is asking one day, can I bone some chickens with you? As opposed to waiting for 6 months for someone to say, would you like to bone some chickens? The more you can learn at an earlier age and obviously you've got to, once you've got the skills, you've got to practice them and implement them in your roles. But if you've got, if you've got someone that's willing to teach you, seek the learning as well as, wait before waiting for it.
Well, that's amazing advice, Oliver. We've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds to hear your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, mate. Really good talking to you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.